All right, let's now get reaction on this from opposition party leader PUDEMO's Mlungisi Makhanya. Mr. Makhanya, appreciate your time this morning. We were listening to Alpheus Nxumalo, who's the Eswatini government spokesperson, moments ago, and he says that there was a great turnout from what he observed in yesterday's parliamentary elections. What is your analysis of the voting that took place yesterday?
Good morning, and thank you for having us, and good morning to Mr. Nxumalo. What we can say is that we are not surprised. Mr. Nxumalo has been repeating this lie and believing that it will assume the status of the truth. The fact of the matter is that there were never long queues that would have given a sense that indeed the numbers that have been flagging as the numbers of registered people are the numbers of people who came out to vote. But notwithstanding that, as Mr. Nxumalo himself has alluded to this reality, that we are still going to put together the right figures and indeed tell what was the turnout. But I think it is important for us to state this fact. For us, it's really never an issue of the numbers of people who turned out or otherwise. We have, as a movement, accepted that truth-telling in the main is a very lonely exercise. The reality of the situation, however, is that the majority of Swazis have always avoided involving themselves in this process. If Mr. Nxumalo were to give you the figures that they release of people who participated in elections in 2018, you will realize that they released the figure of 153,000. We know that the previous election in 2013, only 89,000 people voted, notwithstanding the number of people who had registered, because we know they always use coercive measures to force people to register. But the reality of this matter is that Tinkhundla remain an illegitimate, archaic, undemocratic system that is meant at nothing but to sanitize royal supremacy. And it is for this reason that we remain committed to the struggle for true liberation and democracy in our country.
Mr. Makhanya, Mr. Nxumalo is not actually on the line. The clip that we played was from an interview that he gave on our channel last night. But as we move on, many critics, and I'd imagine yourself included, have called the elections a farce to legitimize the absolute monarchy. What are your thoughts on the credibility and fairness of the election process? I mean, you speak of a number of 89,000 in the last election. Does this justify in many ways your thoughts around this?
Well, these elections are by any standard never free and fair. They do not adhere to the SADC guidelines and principles governing democratic elections. They are offensive to the AU principles that talk about how democratic elections must obtain. So these are not elections. This is a 5-year ritual process that is intended at exercising the regime. Unfortunately, it is bound to fail because the overwhelming majority of Swazis did express their desire for full liberation and democracy in June 2021, when they literally threw their bodies on the line in fighting for change in this country. The mere fact that the king's regime used the army and security forces to kill, silence our people does not in any way buy them any form of legitimacy.
Mr. Makhanya, thank you for staying on the line. We were talking about your insights into the recently held elections, in fact, yesterday that took place for parliamentarians in Eswatini. Now, one of the things that King has done is encourage people to vote for stability and peace. How do you view this message by the King?
Well, thank you very much. Our view is that Swaziland cannot escape the reality that, like all countries in the region, or most of the countries in the region, it would have to embark on a thorough process of transitioning from being a regime that is run by one family to a regime that will be an expression of the people of Swaziland themselves. So anything less than that and will never suffice. No amount of imprisonment, exiling of opposition leaders, and killing of Swazis who are desirous of a sustainable peace and democracy is going to sustain this regime. It is for this reason that we continue as PUDEMO and as the mass democratic movement as a whole to invite the authorities in Swaziland to adhere to the council from SADC to the council from the African Union and to the council of a number of international bodies, that the king must embark on an all-inclusive conversation and dialogue with the Maswati that will ultimately ensure that no one is left behind and every voice in our country gets to be heard and listened to. His belief that he can use the force of the army and the security forces to silence us can only buy him temporal silence. But the struggle we will intensify, would ensure that notwithstanding the mockery of yesterday, we continue to focus on our program of action, which is to bring about freedom and democracy in our country.
Well, Mr. Makhanya, one of the issues you talk about is the recent protests and clashes in the 2021, which resulted in significant casualties. What is your perspective on the prospects for peaceful political change in Eswatini, considering the government's response to dissent?
Well, we remain hopeful that there is still an opportunity to bring about change in Swaziland through peaceful means. But we equally accept that that option, sadly, it is not entirely up to us. It is for this reason that we always caution the regime that the patience of our people is not endless. We have, as a movement and as the mass democratic movement, tabled 5 key point plan towards the resolution of the problem of Swaziland. And the first point that we articulated was that there is a need that political parties and political activity must be allowed in Swaziland, political parties being banned. There is a need that all political prisoners, including the incarcerated former members of parliament, must be unconditionally released. We must create a condition where there's going to be safe return of all exiles. A number of leaders of the organizations in Swaziland are continuing to be forced in exile. And it is only after these things are obtained that then we can sit in a constituent assembly and work out a democratic constitution that will onboard all the views of the people of Swaziland. And we are adamant that such a process can obtain when there is a transitional authority in place, because we cannot entrust this government that has blood on its hand to preside over the process where Swazis must come together and map out a democratic constitution. It is going to be through that process that then we're going to go into...
sadly run short of time. PUDEMO's President Mlungisi Makhanya giving us analysis on the elections in Eswatini that took place yesterday.